Just FYI, we didn't have a podcast on the schedule this week, but rather than skip the week, many people said they just as soon do like another random show where callers and listeners and viewers bring their own comments and questions, and we just see what happens. And so once again, we're doing a Google Hangout for my radio listeners on Blog Talk Radio and on iTunes and podcast applications. There is a video for the YouTube version in the description box, so you can watch instead of listen if you prefer. But about 20 to 25 minutes into the exchange, the subject of Jared Fogle came up. Now, Jared Fogle is the former Subway spokesperson who went to prison for molesting kids. And that discussion kind of dominated the whole last half of the show. It was very interesting stuff. And I referenced a recent blog article that was written by Sarah Morehead. Now, Sarah is a frequent face and voice in the movement, and she is sort of navigating some of these waters herself personally, going through some allegations of abuse in her own circle, and can sort of speak to this, and did so. Rather than simply reference her blog, I thought it might be good to actually talk to Sarah Morehead herself. And so after our last viewer caller at the end of the show, I have tacked on a separate conversation, which I recorded the day after with Sarah Morehead so she could speak to this personally. I felt like that was the best move, the right thing to do, and the best way to sort of address the message she's trying to communicate. So that's happening at the end of the caller portion of the show. And thank you so much for listening and watching. I want to start, though, with Jim Helton. There's something going on in relation to the Ark Encounter, which is scheduled for its grand opening in July. We just did a show about the Ark Encounter. But Tri-State Freethinkers are putting together something that I think you need to know about. So I've asked Jim to join me here for just a second. Jim, how's it going, man? Good to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's going great.
All right. So you guys are going to turn the screw a little bit. Ken Ham's going to be driving down the highway. And if your plan goes... if it all comes together, he's going to see what as a billboard off the streets or highways?
We have a billboard with Noah's Ark on there and with the headline, Genocide Incest Park, celebrating 2,000 years of myths.
Has anybody raised the issue that on the billboard it says 2,000 years? But of course, if we're talking about the Noah timeline, I think even Ken Ham says that was 4,400-ish years ago in relation to a 6,000-year-old Earth. So you guys are using the number 2,000 for a specific reason?
Yes, we took that out of American Atheist playbook of the Bible, Old and New Testament. The Bible as we know it today is about 2,000 years old, and that's what we're targeting that people know today. But the story is much older than that.
And how is this being funded?
We have an Indiegogo page. We already have enough funding in less than 24 hours to put up one billboard, but our goal is to put them up in multiple locations and throughout the summer to draw attention to how immoral this story is. I mean, we'll defend their right to put up their park. They can do whatever they want, but we find the story highly immoral and inappropriate for a family fun day.
It's a little scary to see a lot of these little pod people going into something like just watching the comments on the Facebook pages, outside of the ones I see, which are obvious from skeptics, which are usually brilliant and priceless. But outside of that, it's a cacophony of amens. So beautiful to see this wonderful true story come to life. I can't wait to take my young children. And of course, anyone who's been to the Creation Museum knows that Ken Ham has no qualms about defending incest. He has an entire exhibit, a small exhibit in the Creation Museum, which talks about how, hey, incest in this context is fine according to God's law, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and this is the second time the earth was populated through incest. This isn't even the first go-around of it.
So what do you need? If we were to sort of be a part of this, is it the more funding you get, the more billboards you can put up? And do you have to go through some sort of a vetting or approval process? Because there are a lot of billboard companies that would see you guys coming and won't have anything to do with you. So do we even know they'll accept your money and put the thing up?
Yeah, verbally, we got a verbal yes. We talked to the billboard company. They asked me if our billboard was controversial or offensive. And I said, only if you consider genocide and incest offensive. They laughed and said, well, we have to charge our political rate. It'll be a lot more expensive, but we should be fine. I sent the images over today to be approved. I should have them back by Monday. So we should be okay, but there's always a chance they could reject it. We did find a company that we think will do it.
Jim, this is Kentucky, man. They're going to have somebody on staff somewhere who's going to say it's offensive or it's hate speech. and they're going to probably find a reason to, if nothing else, protest, right?
Yeah, and that's why they charge us the political rate, because it allows, if anybody wants to counter it, somebody, Answers in Genesis could put up a billboard countering ours. And that's their motto. That's why they do it. They try to stay neutral on those grounds. I think the other thing for people driving by or seeing this, that, I grew up Christian. We heard this as a great children's story, the animals and how great story it was. People don't realize that it is a story about genocide and incest, and we hope we make people think twice when they see this. Yes, some people will be offended, but we really want to make them think about what this story is about.
All right, well, I'll include a link. You guys are fundraising for how long? Through the end of March or first part of April or what?
Through the end of April.
Okay, all right. Well, that'll give our listeners plenty of time if they want to pitch in a couple of bucks to support. I just like the idea of Ken Ham hearing about this story. I'd like to picture in my mind the look on his face when he's like,
we're waiting his response, and we're looking forward to it. I think the neatest thing about the Billboard campaign is we accept any donation, no matter how small. We appreciate it. But for a $500 donation, you can actually be in the Billboard drowning, facing up to Noah's Ark. So we have several spots available for that. We're also giving away some posters of the Billboard, and for $100 we give you a poncho of protection, protecting against the next flood.
The poncho of protection and the opportunity to have your own self depicted as being among the drowning horde during Noah's flood.
And then the last thing that we're hoping to do, if we raise enough money, their opening day is scheduled for July 7th. We want to throw a counter event and have a huge opening day and invite scientists, skeptics, David Silverman, anybody we can get, and have comedians, live music, and throw a big party on that day to counter their opening day, to celebrate reason and logic instead of genocide and incest that they'll be celebrating.
At this moment, I'm thinking, how do I sell this to Natalie? Honey, I'd like to dip into our savings account and take $500. Just only $500, honey. I'd like to. Well, what's it for? Well, I like to show my own face among the drowning masses on. I don't. That's a conversation I'm going to have to mull over in my mind.
Well, you send me a message, and I think we can give you a Thinking Atheist discount.
No. I'm not. I don't want the discount. I don't want that. I want to be treated like anybody and everybody, because I am anybody and everybody. Honestly, I'm glad to help get the word out. I think it's funny, and it's funny / tragic, but it's, I think, something maybe that will stir the pot, blow some fresh air through the cobwebs, get some people thinking. The word incest alone just rattles people. Whoa, wait a minute, because that's not the word normally tossed out in relation to Noah's Ark. So I'll include that link for the Billboard campaign in the description box of this show, and that way we can direct people to there, and you have to the end of April. Fair enough?
All right, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, best wishes with the project, Jim. Thanks a bunch, man.
All right.
I've got Jammin on the Google Hangout switchboard. Thanks for being a part of the show. You have something you want to talk about today?
Sure. I've been an out atheist for maybe several months now. It's taken me a long time to get out, but I read Peter Boghossian's book a while back, and I know you've had him and Anthony Magnabosco on the show. I've watched several of his videos, and I really like the process that they go through to talk to believers about their faith and to try to get them to question it. But whenever I talk to my family, who are still Christians, I get this blank stare and this, well, I have my faith, and that's all I need. I know it's true, and there's nothing you can do to make me even question it, even think about questioning it. Is there any, have you ever experienced that? I'm sure you have, but do you have any kind of advice or something to get past that?
I've got right here on my cell phone a text from my mother from this morning. Those who know my story, I don't want to be too redundant, but my story relates to yours, I think. Mom and Dad it's rare that I say never. Never say never. In my mind, I don't think they would ever walk away from their faith, a lifelong commitment to a literal Bible and Jesus, and to know how hardcore they've been for decades upon decades of their lives. Dad's 82, Mom's 79, and they're in a reinforcement culture. So, They pounded this stuff into the minds of their kids and grandkids. They all go to the same type of churches. They all pray the same kind of prayers at meals. It's an echo chamber. And I have the right to live my own life. And I understand your frustration when you feel like, these people their desire to believe is simply greater than their desire to know.
Sure.
So have you come at these people with points of data? You've given them evidence. You've talked about things like evolution and debunking the Bible. Have you had those conversations or what?
Well, I've had several conversations, especially with my dad. And it's not really that I want to change his mind about Christianity. Like you're saying, it's, I'm not sure. I just want to live my life. But I think the reason I just want him to acknowledge that I have actually done the work and figured this out, and kind of give me, I don't know, validation or what. But
well, I think I get what you're saying. You don't need. Well, I don't think you need his validation, and I don't want to project. So you tell me if I'm wrong. But he's probably painting you as somebody who, for some emotional reason or unreasonable reason, has left the reservation. And you're simply trying to draw a big red circle around the fact that I have pretty damn good reasons for having concern. And I think you need to acknowledge that I'm not going through a midlife crisis, or I'm not, the devil is not whispering in my ear. But I'm a reasonable guy with reasonable concerns. You're just trying to communicate that. Would that be accurate?
That's pretty much it.
And instead, what do you get? Do you get the mannequin stare and the pitiful smile? I've got my faith, and there's not much you can do to tell me. But at the same time, it's like, well, I know there's something wrong with you since you've walked away from my faith. It's a personal insult, right? I'm like you. I don't need mom and dad to change their minds. I'm not pounding on their door saying, "Hey, stop believing in God." I'll fight for their right to believe in God. They have a right to do so. But I'm pretty sick and tired of being pawed at like I'm some kind of science fair project, when honestly the burden of proof never shifted. They're the ones making the God claims. They're the ones making the Bible claims. Damn it, it's time for you to start putting up or shutting up.
Right.
Or at the very least, not condemning me for living a life that doesn't look quite like yours.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. Honestly, I think you have to determine whether or not they are sending or receiving. And if they're not really receiving, if they're just a bullhorn, if they've completely shut down, I think it's healthy for them to see you live loud and proud, to live honestly, to live on your own terms. I think if they begin to cross boundaries into your home and they begin to try to taint you with language that involves guilt and shame and all those things, you don't have to put up with any of that. So I hope it doesn't come to that for you. I mean, are you guys at that point? I mean, do you get along?
Well, with my parents, my dad and two of my siblings, we do. I haven't really talked to my other sister for a while, and she's very hardcore fundamentalist, and it never comes up, and then we haven't talked to each other on the phone for months.
So are you guys Facebook friends? I mean, do you connect at all?
Facebook friends.
Do you post atheist or religion criticism related stuff on your page?
I do.
How's that go over?
I don't get a lot of response from any of them.
Is it that they just sort of gave up? Did they respond in the beginning and then they're like, screw it, or they just check out?
Yeah. And another thing I would do is when they post religious things, I'll kind of stick my 2 cents in there and kind of give them what I'm thinking about it, and get a lot of good conversation that way too. But
what qualifies as good conversation? Is it "I'll pray for you" or the Bible says, or is it legitimately good conversation?
It's legitimately good conversation. There's points being made on both sides and talking back and forth. But then a lot of times it does devolve into you're wrong, or you're a bad person, or whatever. And that I end it then. So.
Jamin, I'll pray for you. I pray one day the Lord will reveal himself to you.
Amen, brother.
The way he has revealed himself to me. And I just know in my heart, which is always what it comes back to, right? You and I go back and we're like, here's why the Bible is a contradictory, immoral mess. Here's why personal experience claims are not helpful. Here's the subjectivity of the human brain. Here are the proofs of evolution. Here's point by point by point by point, all these pieces of rich information. And at the end of the day, they just look at you and they go, you know what? I just know it in my heart.
Right.
And what do you do with that, right?
Right.
All right, Jamin. Well, I appreciate you being part of the broadcast, my friend, and good luck in the conversations you have. I myself, for my part, I've decided I'm just going to be me. I'm going to be me at the volume that I want to be without apology. I'm going to make sure that my life is about me and my family and not trying to please everybody else. And it's my hope there's somebody somewhere on the family tree who may secretly be going through some doubts. You know, not everybody is 100% true blue, dyed-in-the-wool, sold out Jesus. I know there's somebody who's like, this shit makes no sense, secretly.
Right.
And they're watching me sort of blow through the wall, and maybe they'll follow me through somewhere down the way. I have hopes. So I appreciate you, my friend. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, I don't know. I would just look down at my phone. I've got this, just off the telemarketers are killing me. I looked down at missed call, and I got another one earlier this morning. And now the telemarketers are not even, they're not even people. Like you can't even either protest or jack with them. And the one I'm getting most often outside of the Google, hi, this is so-and-so with Google, which is a scam, by the way. Don't ever return those calls. Just look it up on the web. It's a known scam to get your personal information. Google does not call you. But there's another one, and they use this unbelievably stupid line. Are they having success with it? Is that why it's so ubiquitous? Because they'll say something, I think it starts with, this is a vital call for a particular reason. Well, no shit. You're calling for a particular reason. Oh, really? What am I supposed to do with that information? So anyway, I auto-reject all these calls, and I get 2 or 3 a day. It doesn't make any difference. I still get 2 or 3 a day. How many different phone numbers are they using? How many different organizations are they representing? They're making me crazy. And it's a huge distraction when you're living your life and you got to stop and you got to put up with some robocall that you can't even do anything about. You can't even tell them, stop calling me. I'm busy. I don't need a vital call for a particular reason. So, sorry, digression. Let's see. I got Derek on the switchboard. Derek, thanks for being a part of the broadcast. What's going on, man?
Not much. How you doing, Seth?
I'm well. Thanks for watching. What's happening?
So we just got a letter the other day with my son's school. We're coming back from, he's 6 years old. He's in kindergarten. And the other day we kind of had a weird conversation because he started mentioning, he started getting scared of hell all of a sudden. And both my wife and I are atheists. We're not religious at all. He's never really gone over this conversation with us at this time, being 6 years old. And all of a sudden he came on the other day and he was talking about Jesus and being afraid of hell and this kind of stuff. And, you know, we kind of just brushed it off thinking it was kids at school whispering in his ear or, you know, talking what their parents say. Excuse me. And then about 2 days later, we get his blue book, you know, his folder full of his homework home, and it's got 2 different flyers in there for praising Jesus and come to the First Presbyterian Church in such and such a town and come praise with us, have lunch. And, you know, it really rubbed us the wrong way. He goes to a public school, so these things, to my knowledge, shouldn't be in his curriculum, correct? It should not be coming from a point of authority like his teacher.
Now, I just saw an article that was sent to me. I think it's South Carolina, and if it's not, forgive me. It is a community called Rock Hill, I think. And there is this, I'm not sure, it's an attempt to take the kids who are in public school at Rock Hill and give them the option to be bussed over to some church classes or some religion-based classes if they would like that option. I mean, you and I can see this train coming, you know. The church is always dancing over the church-state line. It's always deciding that, you know, well, if you're going to truly educate children, you're going to have to teach them about Jesus, and Jesus is truth with a capital T. I myself think it's hugely inappropriate, if not illegal, but I'd have to look at the case in question. How's he doing? I mean, did they have him genuinely rattled about dying and going to hell?
Well, I don't think he's, I guess, old enough yet to really have that genuine fear. He's still doesn't totally understand what death is. His grandmother died last year.
All right, now tell me again how old he is.
He's 6. He's in kindergarten.
All right.
Yeah, so I don't think I think he understands, when things die, they're gone, but I don't think he understands the finality of it and that kind of stuff yet. So that conversation may come in the future. But the question we were more wondering about is this worth bringing up to the school board and writing a letter and saying, this is hugely inappropriate. We don't want our son hearing this kind of stuff, especially at that age. I mean, you're just a sponge. You're absorbing everything from authority figures, and if he's learning stuff like this that he's taking home, what else is he hearing that just kind of brushes off and is going to be a thought in his head later on? I don't quite know how big of a deal to make it.
Okay, but they were handed out where? In class or in front of the school building, or?
I believe it was in his class, because it was in his blue book, his homework book he takes home of all of his schoolwork that we have to go over with him when he gets home.
I don't suppose you have any of that stuff close by where you
I don't believe I do.
Hold it up and take a look at it. All right, so they're taking literature which talks about a biblical hell, and they are handing it out in public school during class to 6-year-olds.
Yes.
That's absolutely a reason to protest. It's an outright crossing of the church-state line. In fact, if I were you, I would immediately contact Andrew and Dan and Annie Laurie and everybody at the Freedom From Religion Foundation, because they are really good at following up, and they got people who are experts at this type of thing, where they can go in and tap somebody on the shoulder and say, look, I don't know if you've realized this, but you are acting illegally and unethically, and this needs to stop. I would check with them and let me know how it turns out, okay?
Definitely do that.
All right, take care of yourself, man.
Thanks, Seth.
Cindy, thanks for being a part of the broadcast. You're on the air. What do you have for us today?
Actually, I just saw that you were on, and I thought I would listen in, but I do have one question. Everyone always assumes that everybody knows what God is. I've never heard a definition.
Well, let's see, if I'm in the Christian faith, I've got a specific picture of God. Usually he looks like Jesus. The God of God, Yahweh, Jesus' father, I've never really put a face to him outside of those sort of bearded oil paintings and whatnot. Is that what you mean? Like God is this nebulous other that defies definition, or what?
Well, I was raised Jewish, and I have tons of friends who say they believe in God, and I never really bought any of the fables, so I'm always confused as to what people mean.
Have you determined in your own life that people sort of paint a God in their own image kind of thing?
No, I always thought that they had a specific thing in mind, whether, some sort of nebulous being that was out there. I mean, I've always thought, maybe God is the internet, it's the sum total of all knowledge, or it's, the earth itself, because it was, so, all-inclusive of everything that is, earth. But I've just never understood what it was that people actually meant. And I wonder if it is different for every single person.
Well, in some circles of discussion, this is actually considered a defense of God. I just did a presentation for the Atheist to Facebook online convention where I was talking about the changing face of God and how, if you talk to anybody, they do that same thing. You say, describe God, well, the description is suspiciously different than the description of the person sitting next to them. And if Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, then if you hold to the Christian God anyway, and you hold to Jesus, well, wait a minute, how can we have different descriptions? And I think it speaks to the subjectivity of, we've carved a God out of whatever. We've got a rule book here, whether it's a judgmental God or a loving God, whether it's an involved God or a watchmaker God. Everybody's kind of got their own thing, and then they carve God in that image. But many people see this as a proper defense of God. Well, God is, for me, who I need God to be. And he may look different to you because you may need him to be different for you. It's like that scene in Star Trek V, shitty movie, directed by William Shatner.
Horrible.
But at the end, when the God imposter comes out and says, I have many faces, and they show the different randoms or montage of God faces, I kind of see it like that. I appear to different people in different ways, which is, how does Dillahunty say it? It is sufficiently vague, Being raised in a Jewish home, did you hold on to some of the Jewish traditions? Did you enjoy the structure?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I went to Hebrew school, and actually, my rabbi was a really crafty little devil, because my very first year of Hebrew school, we had, basically the boys got everything. The boys got tzitzit, they got a tallis, they got tefillin, they got, they had all of these accoutrements, and they were the ones who were allowed to lead the prayers, and they were the ones who were supposed to sing, and we were just basically, the girls were just supposed to sit there and shut up and listen. And I couldn't handle it, and I didn't understand why that would be. And so I asked him about it, and he says, "Oh, well, God knows that boys are stupid, and so they need all of these reminders." I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I shut up for another couple of years, and I listened to it, and I was just like, no, this is just ridiculous. And so,
just from the short conversation we've had, I'm having a difficult time seeing you as someone who could be told what to do.
Well, yeah.
I don't see that. You doing okay these days?
Oh, I'm doing great. Life is good.
Good. Well, I think you're onto something. I mean, I think the more nebulous religious claims are, the more unfalsifiable they are. So if you've removed specific characteristics, then they become the ever-moving goalpost. You can't ever pin them down, so you can't ever disprove it. So, hey, why couldn't God exist? It's pretty convenient.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for watching. I appreciate it.
Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you later.
Thank you. I will.
I've got Leon on the switchboard. Leon, you want to participate in the show today?
Yeah, I have just a question. I was always brought up on the notion that church can be anywhere. It can be at a home. It can be wherever you preach the gospel. So, if that's true, why do we need these big, multi-billion-dollar buildings? Tall buildings that Jesus even said that worship, praising him just to get rich to sin. So rebuilding these giant, multi-billion-dollar buildings, isn't that a sin? If it's for Jesus, is it a sin or not?
Let me look up that scripture. Hebrews 10:25, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Essentially, the church is a body of believers coming together in any capacity, but the church doesn't see an invalidation of the large format gathering. So while you and I might congregate in a living room and praise Jesus and Bible study, and that's church, Joel Osteen's church with 20 whatever thousand that attend in a weekend also qualifies as church. And, they see merit in all of these. They don't see it necessarily in terms of money or numbers. They just see them as sort of different incarnations of the concept of church.
All right.
I mean, that's one guy's opinion. On a completely sort of unrelated note, I'm just looking through the headlines and the different things that have come across my desk. I was following the story of Jared Fogle. You know him. He was the Subway spokesman who he was convicted on several counts of child abuse, child molestation. He was sent to prison. Of course, Subway, I can't imagine what the response was when Subway heard about this. Can you imagine your spokesperson of 15 years has been molesting children? And of course, they immediately dismissed him and condemned it, and good for them. I'm glad they did. And then Fogle goes off to prison. Well, apparently he was assaulted in prison and beaten pretty soundly. He was beaten up pretty bad. And I understand the instinct of many people, moral people, good people who are aghast at child abuse, who are outraged at child abuse, who there's a primal part of you that's like, yeah, he had it coming. I mean, I understand that there's a shade of that. Sometimes you have to fight. And many people don't bother, but I found myself extremely alarmed at just the number of people who were cheerleading those in the prison environment, the inmates who beat Fogle up. They were essentially cheerleading violence and violent reprisal. And even in the atheist community, I've seen some people who were just cheerleading. Yeah, karma's a bitch. Yeah, he had it coming. Yeah, who do I send? Somebody said, who do I send money to so I can reward them for doing this service to humanity? Anyway, Sarah Morehead, who has been active in the movement for quite a while, She has come out of a situation where there have been accusations of abuse, and she is navigating through it. But she wrote an article, a guest article for The Friendly Atheist on Pathos that sort of addressed, are we ever justified to say things like, yeah, go get him. I hope you kill him next time. I mean, that's the kind of language some people are using. Somebody buy that guy a steak dinner, you know. And so I'll include the link to Sarah's article. It's a long one, but I will include the link to the article in the description box of this show in case you'd like to go and kind of read the perspective of someone who has seen abuse firsthand, who's been right there on the front lines of it. And it's certainly worth being part of the discussions about Fogle and about the larger topic of abuse, whether it's children or otherwise. So anyway, I'll put that in the description box for reference. Let's see. I've got, how do I say that? Is it papillon?
It's papillon.
Papillon. I wasn't even close.
No, it's French for butterfly.
Say it again for me.
Papillon.
Papillon. Better?
Yes.
I'll work on it. Do you have something you wanted to contribute, or are you just watching the show today?
I'm just watching and just have been following you for a couple of years on the piece about child abuse. I'm one who lived with that scenario, so I don't want anyone killed, but a few licks, I can't help feel like, now I know it sounds so almost, it's irrational, but it's something that if you're a victim of it and it has caused years, a lot, I'm 50, almost 56, and it's caused years of pain and trying to navigate what's a real threat and what's not. Yeah.
So there's a real part of you that says, yeah, get him. Yeah, go.
Well, I don't know about get him. It's just I have no sympathy. He put himself there. As soon as you take a child and you bring harm to them, the aftermath is it goes beyond years.
Well, I don't want to make that clear that no one ever, myself or otherwise, Sarah, anybody is minimizing the tremendous harm done to children. This isn't a referendum on child abuse. We take a hard stand against it. What I'm talking about here is, I think, this sort of mob justice mentality that, hey, you know what? If somebody wants to do something outside of the rule of law that causes physical harm to someone who has caused harm to another, I'm okay with turning a blind eye to it. I worry a little bit about where that might lead us. I understand it, but I think if we understand, you yourself use the word irrational. You understand it's an emotional reaction because of what you've been through. Yes,
it's almost a trigger. It's like one of the things that when I was a Christian, as or a believer, I should say, is that I thought somewhere God would take care of this, and when I realized and that will never happen, then I was absolutely grieving that, because that hope and that desire that someone bigger was going to take care of this. And so it's not easy for me not to feel something, even since it hasn't happened for so many years. Clearly you see it still brings out an emotion that is something that it's beyond words. So
yeah,
when someone hurts someone who has hurt a child, I don't exactly advocate. I don't advocate anyone taking, unless it's actually happening, certainly getting physical with that person. But I feel nothing but no sympathy for those people that are willing to do that, and they will never admit it. Those type of people don't admit it. They're not like you and I.
We call this cosmic justice. Many times the appeal of a higher power, of a supreme being, an objective moral standard or standard giver, a judge, a divine judge. The reason that holds appeal for a great many people is that it is one of the ways that they are able to deal with the fact that, it's not really a fair life. Life isn't fair. Life isn't really just. Everything doesn't happen for a reason, meaning a grander cause. And so when you are processing the horrors of something like child abuse or sexual abuse in any capacity or man's inhumanity to man. For many people, one way they navigate through it is to tell themselves that, well, one day you'll stand before God. You know what? You may not see justice here on earth, but one day you're gonna feel the fire to your feet, and you'll know that you should have acted, differently. You should have treated people better. You should have not committed these heinous acts. The idea of cosmic justice for many is a way for them to think, well, it's all going to even out in the end. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. And when you realize when you become a non-theist, you kind of, it's kind of mourning that thought that there will be some kind of justification or justice for that person, and they'll rot in hell or something, but they won't.
So you feel kind of cheated then a little bit, like is this all they get for all the damage that they wrought, for all the people they hurt, for all the hideous things that they have done? This here on planet Earth is all they're going to get. I mean, do you feel cheated in some way?
Yes, and because of the statute of limitations runs its course and runs out for that person as well, then you really are at a loss because there's nothing that can be done. And so, zero sympathy for those that harm children. Zero.
All right.
I don't want to harm. I wouldn't harm anyone, and I'm glad I didn't become someone who harms. But as my therapist said, some people, and he included me in that, we're remarkable because I could have become a prostitute, into drugs, or an abuser myself, and I didn't.
Do you think that child molesters can be rehabilitated? I don't know the answer to this question, but do you think so?
You don't. I don't think they can be rehabilitated. I don't.
I think you have to err on the side of caution
for someone who can harm a child, who can do to a child what most of us don't even want to think about. Yeah. For them to be able to take that action, and to my knowledge, I don't know any child abuser, sexual abuser, who has admitted to what they've done. They don't see that. I don't know what causes that. I don't understand it.
It's like there's a documentary about abuse in the Catholic Church regarding one specific priest who was shuffled from parish to parish to parish under the radar. And he was interviewed for the documentary, and even he showed no real remorse. I think he may have said he was, I'm sorry if I caused any harm, but he had no clue or had denied or was being deceptive. For some reason, you did not see that he really had remorse and regret. I think whether or not they can be rehabilitated, and again, I don't know the answer to the question. I know it's a strong subject that everyone's got an opinion on, but I think we have to err on the side of caution for the sake of anyone who might ever cross their path. That's an answer I don't want to get wrong for fear of being too cautious. So no, I don't think you take these child molesters and throw them back out and say, we'll give you another shot, we'll see what happens. I don't think we have the latitude to do that. I don't think we have the right to do that to potential victims who may one day cross their paths. We have to err on the side of caution and do whatever we have to do to protect these kids. So, yeah.
But these people these abusers, the biggest way to not give them rehab, but is to expose them. They operate under secrecy, so exposure is huge. And, as long as everybody knows who they are, they're not going to be able to do that, as easily.
I appreciate your perspective. Are you doing okay these days? Are you doing better?
Years of therapy and great family support, yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I'm so thankful for you, and I hope your life is bringing you joy and good stuff. And
it is, and I'm thankful for you and for everything that you do to bring others, out of this cloud.
Well, I just do this, I just do this.
But you're good. You get it. You help us listen and understand and feel unalone.
People ask me why I do what I do, because I'm I'm not Steven Pinker. I'm not any of these great thinkers. But I think at the end of the day, I want to pursue good information, and I want to encourage people. And, there's a liberation in not knowing a lot of the answers, because as I ask the questions, the listeners may be asking the questions with me. Maybe they're interested in learning as I learn, or maybe they know the answer and they can come back and participate. And so we speak to each other like every people. And I think it becomes like family. We just encourage each other to get through this, to take the journey, to make each other better day to day. And, I'm far from a perfect host, but I love what I do, and I'm honored to be able to do what I love. So thanks for the kind words. It means the world to me.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
I've got Maya on the switchboard. Thanks for being a part of the broadcast. What do you have for us today?
I was listening to your conversation just now about child molestation, and I wrote on the chat just now that this is one of the things that's awful about the Danish justice system, is that child molesters get out in a few months. Our whole philosophy about prison is rehabilitation rather than punishment so much. So like murder, for example, might get you 10 to 12 years. We have a maximum of 15.
For murder?
Yeah, for murder.
Wow.
But sex crimes, it's insane. It's a few months. Rape, violent rape will get you maybe a year, I guess. And I've seen child molesters get out in a few months. People that have raped their own children for years, and it's one of the only things about the Danish system that really pisses me off, because we do have a really good society, and I'm so thankful for all of the welfare that we have. But sometimes the justice system just pisses me off.
What happens to these people when they're released in a few months? There has to be a hugely high instance of repeat offenses. Yes, I mean, I would think they don't just stop.
Well, our recidivism rates in general are quite low. I don't know the specifics for sex crimes, but we do also have very wide access to psychological help and to treatment in general.
Is there ever a point when you give up on someone?
I do think there's a time that you give up on people, but I don't think that I know that you have a 3 strikes law. Is it in all states, or is it?
I don't know if that's a federal law or if it's done state by state. I couldn't say.
I don't know, but that strikes me the wrong way. Like 3, just whatever you do and it's life. I don't think that should be how it works, but I do think that there's a point where that a certain offender is going to reoffend.
Or there's such a high probability that it would be irresponsible to take the chance. If you take someone who has a history of sexually abusing children, you have a moral obligation to, even if you were wrong, to err on the side of caution for the sake of potential future victims.
Of course you do.
Out of a sense of justice for those who were victims in the past, you just can't say, well, he's got a 30% chance of doing better next time. Let's roll the dice. I think that's hugely irresponsible. So.
Yeah, definitely. And when it comes to child molestation and even rape as well, you're not just affecting the one person that you're committing the crime against. You're also affecting the whole family of that person, and your own family for that matter. Families of children that are molested, they go through so much pain and so much recovery that it's hugely irresponsible, as you say.
Hey, thanks for being a part of it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I actually wanted to, if I can change the subject, is that all right?
Yeah, sure. We've got the time.
Okay, because I actually wanted to hear your opinion. I work with autism, and we deal so often with people that hang on to this vaccines cause autism or it should be cured, and there are these insane things with like people that are drinking it's called miracle mineral solution, and it's bleach really, and they're making their children drink this stuff to try to cure them, and it's And I wanted to get your 2 cents on, like, what's the culture like over there? Is autism something that is seen as a disease that should be cured, or?
I took the liberty of pulling that up. Miracle Mineral Supplement. I think I'll just read a quick graph or two to inform myself and the audience as to what you're talking about. Now, this is from the wiki page, so I'm sure there are other sources as well. MMS, Miracle Mineral Supplement, is a toxic solution of 28% sodium chloride in distilled water. It contains essentially the same ingredient as industrial strength bleach before activation with a food-grade acid. The name was coined by Jim Humble in his 2006 self-published book, The Miracle Mineral Solution of the 21st Century. A more dilute version is marketed as chlorine dioxide solution. MMS is falsely promoted as a cure for HIV, malaria, hepatitis viruses, the H1N1 flu virus, common colds, autism, acne, cancer, and much more. People are doing this?
Yes, they are giving this to their small children to try to cure them of autism. And I don't get it. Like, I know autism. I've seen the whole range. I have Asperger's syndrome myself, and it's so offensive to me that people think it's more important to cure it than to help us lead happy lives.
Honestly, it's frustrating to live in a culture where so many Americans are still convinced that Jenny McCarthy knows more about vaccines and autism than the whole of medical science. It just makes me crazy. And I think as long as we have people getting their medical advice from celebrities instead of science-based physicians and scientists, I think we're going to be struggling with misconceptions about vaccines, about autism, about science in general. And isn't that the struggle, right? I mean, when people are making a heart decision on what is essentially a fact-based argument, you know, we're going to have to get around the emotion of it and start looking into the hard data and do some real educating.
Yeah, and then you have guys like Mr. Humble here, who's an ex-Scientologist, I believe.
Oh my God, it just gets worse and worse.
Making money off of people's, I don't know, pain, I guess.
No, I was talking about this during our Evil Western Medicine show last week where, you know, people are giving their hard-won money, their life savings, all the resources, the time and energy and finances, everything they've got for these pie-in-the-sky solutions pitched by anybody who promises hope. And, you know, when someone's hopeless, they're so vulnerable and they're so easy to manipulate. And the church is amazing at this. And even when they are doing it for reasons they believe to be sincere, they really think they're offering a solution. They have whole ministries and organizations targeted to the vulnerable. You know, they have divorce recovery, they have abuse ministries, they have, you know, whether it's drug or physical abuse, they find young children, people who are at a point where they are really malleable and really vulnerable, and then they go after them because they know this is our opportunity. And, you know, as long as someone's selling hope to the tune of an offering plate or a book sale or something else, we're unfortunately going to see that kind of thing. But you and I can continue to sound the drum of alarm and see if we can help to counter that. So thanks for being a part of the broadcast. Thanks so much for the kind words, too. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
All right.
I enjoy your podcast.
Thank you. As I had referenced Sarah Morehead's article in the conversation we've been having for the last half hour, I thought it was a good idea to actually speak to Sarah herself. So I've asked her to join me on Google Hangout to talk for just a second. Hi, Sarah. How's it going?
Pretty good. How you doing?
I was looking at the title of the article, and I was wondering how much hate and death has been raining down upon you for the way you phrased it. I mean, honestly, between us, it's not. I probably wouldn't have phrased it that way. You did so for a reason, right?
I did, absolutely.
And the reason was what?
Well, it obviously got everybody's attention. But as I explain in the article, the nice guy offender persona is actually one that's a profile that exists for offenders, and it's a profile type. It's one that is particularly difficult for law enforcement to prosecute, and I put the links to that in the article, and I thought that was necessary to really get the point across. Sex offenders can be perceived as these nice guy individuals, and that's relevant to the entire concept.
Well, again, we're looking at many people on the internet who read and comment only on headlines. So they saw you saying, well, sex offenders can be nice guys, and they immediately thought you were an apologist for rapists.
That's exactly what happened quite a bit, and that's fine because, it was one of those, as soon as I see that kind of commentary, it was very clear they didn't read the article, quite frankly. I literally, in the first sentence, said, put your pitchforks down, listen to me for just a second. And there were people that disagreed after reading it, and that's obviously fine. Everybody's going to have different conclusions. But, the bottom line to me was what seems to be a connection between demonizing these people once they're convicted, and making it more challenging for people, especially children, to be believed in the early stages when they're trying to tell people they trust that someone's violating them. And that, to me, is the bigger message. And what I found fascinating was how many people really did read the article, and then in the comments or when they shared it on Facebook, said things like, I read this, and I have to admit I was one of the people that was cheering this on. And now that I've read this, I've changed my mind, and I'm not going to act like this anymore.
Act like what, Sarah? I mean, what were they saying?
Sure. So a lot of the commentary that originally got me interested in writing this was, they're sharing these articles that are addressing Jared's assault in prison, and they're saying things about, he got what he deserved, and making jokes about footlongs, and really just encouraging this idea that rape and murder and violence towards people who have committed obviously heinous and terrible crimes is somehow valid. Even though they've gone through the justice system, they've been convicted, they've already given their sentence, as if we as a society have a right to impose an extra sentence on top of that. And that was a big part of where I just felt like I needed to write that.
And I was thinking Natalie and I were talking about it in my own life, and I want you, if you can, you're going to have to tell me what you can and cannot speak about and how it can and cannot be phrased. But, if someone had sexually assaulted one of our kids, there would be a deep-seated part of me that I would see them not in human terms. They would be the other, they would be the monster. And then if something horrible happened to them, there would be this sort of primal part of me that didn't grieve and perhaps even felt a measure of gladness. I mean, and you fight that, but at the same time, you hurt my kids, and all bets are off. And, for me, the rules no longer apply. So you better look out. I mean, there's a part of that I think that many of us feel, and I'm seeing a reflection of that. And in fact, one of the protests I had seen from people who were listening to my kind of measured approach to it were, you've never had a child assaulted, have you? Like immediately. And my response was, that's right. And I've never had someone close to be murdered either. But I would like to be a part of the discussions about how our society deals with murder and murderers in a system of justice. I'm not going to recuse myself because it hasn't happened to me yet. I want to be a part of it because it could happen to me or anyone I know in 5 minutes. So talk to me about this sort of eye for an eye thing that's going on and the natural inclinations to lean into that when someone we love has been hurt.
Sure. So there's a couple of sides to it. One is, I encourage people who say, you've never had this happen to you. They don't know the person they're talking to, and they don't know anyone's experiences. And I definitely take issue with just that kind of immediate response of, you're not qualified because I've decided, you haven't disclosed to me what your personal struggles are. So there's that in and of itself. But aside from that, I don't actually take issue with the emotion itself. And that's something I tried really hard to articulate in the article that I wrote. People's emotional reactions are completely valid. I don't think there's any problem with, when someone sees the report that this individual has been assaulted in prison. I had a lot of people say, well, I read that and I couldn't care less. that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There were people who were survivors of abuse who commented or messaged me and said, I saw the news about Jared being assaulted, and I was glad. I felt good about this. It made me feel vindicated somehow about my own abuse. And those are valid feelings that everyone has a right to have. But there's a huge difference in my mind between our emotional side and our emotional reactions and the behavior we choose as a result of those. And that to me is what differentiates us between the criminal mindset and the rest of society. For us to be able to say these emotions matter, I have a right to them, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm going to choose behavior that's more measured and that's going to take a more logical and rational approach. That's incredibly difficult. I'm not pretending it's easy, but that visceral rage you were talking about, it's there. And what I talk about in the article is how very much I felt and still feel all of those things because of the situation we've gone through in the last year. Our family had to deal with our children, my children, being victims of sexual assault. And I talk about that in the article specifically because, not to validate my right to speak to it, because I do agree that, anyone has a right to weigh in on these things, but more to validate the emotion. I had some people saying, well, I'm not as good as you to be able to put these things aside and forgive this person. And I wouldn't ask anyone to, and I'm not saying that I have in our situation, but I can see and recognize my feelings, and I call it cold fury, a visceral rage. There's a lot of emotion that goes with understanding and fully coming to terms with the fact that you've got teams of investigators saying these are the graphic and horrible details of what your children have been through without you knowing it, and for quite some time. I cannot describe how horrible that experience is. At the same time, that's why we have professionals involved. I'm not in a situation that I have to create a sentence or a judgment or any of those things. There's professionals out there who are now weighing all of the evidence before us. They've taken it to court. They're pressing charges. They will decide the outcome of this person's life. I don't have to do that. And that's probably good, because I am too emotionally connected to this. I need to focus on what I'm able to do, which is provide emotional support to my kids who are going through all of this. And that to me is some of that difference. The emotional side is different than the behavior side.
I hate the word slippery slope because we've used them so much they become this cliche, this thing that people interject whenever they're trying to warn against the worst, the extremes or whatnot. But it's an appropriate term for me, I think. If I decide, well, now I bend the rule of law or break the rule or ignore the rule of law for vigilante satisfaction, in this case saying that, well, I subjectively decide now that I'm going to celebrate the murder of a murderer. This stabbing was wrong, but this stabbing over here is okay. This violent beating over here is wrong, but this violent beating is okay. Outside of the system of law and order that we've established, how do you qualify and quantify that? How do you measure it? Before you know it, everybody everywhere is deciding, well, I've been harmed to the degree that they deserve it. And I worry a little bit about that, and I don't really know what to do with that. Do you have any thoughts, Sarah?
I think the biggest thing with that is considering for a bit the impact of those reactions to the people we genuinely are trying to help. I think the reason we see people cheering on the assault of Jared and other people who have abused children or other people truly comes back to, when these things happened, we weren't there, we didn't know. We obviously, any rational, sane person would say, if I saw this happening, I would interfere and stop it. So after the fact, once this person's been convicted, they've, gone through the process, we want something more to happen. We want to feel like we were a part of this justice coming about. And I think that's where that reaction to encourage the retribution comes from. And I can so understand that. But part of what I was trying to convey is how that actually ends up making it more challenging for children who are victims of sexual assault to be believed when they're coming forward, because by demonizing these people, once they've been convicted, or in the process of trial or whatever, by saying these are monsters, these are horrible people that deserve this extra violence to be put on top of them, that they should just expect this level of violence and rape and murder in prison. We kind of perpetuate that stereotype that these sex offenders are, the dirty, nasty people lurking in dark closets with trench coats. And what happens then is, as we back way up to that very first step that started the process, somewhere along the lines, when these people were charged, way before that, weeks before that, months before that, there was a child somewhere that actually had the courage, the bravery to find someone they trust and say, this is something that's happening to me. And they had to believe that the person they were telling was not going to look at them and say, that's such a nice guy. If we have this idea that only monsters are sex offenders, then it backs all the way up. It creates this domino ripple effect to go all the way back to the beginning, where the next time someone says that, next time a child says that to someone they trust, the adult goes in their head and says, but I've heard about those monsters. I mean, God, they get beat up and raped in prison. They deserve all these horrible things. I know this person you're talking about, and they don't deserve those horrible things. They're a nice guy. So for me, a huge part of this is getting people to talk about it and understand that by giving ourselves permission to have the emotion, but stopping the advocacy for violence, we're actually creating a safer space for kids to be able to say, this is something that's happening to me.
There are many who would say the nice guy is the monster, right? The most frightening of monsters is the one that hides behind the accessible, friendly, trustworthy face.
Sure. And that's something that, I linked to the FBI article that explains the nice guy offender persona. And that's something that they have a lot of difficulty with prosecuting, because these are people that are very invested in their community. They're seen as positive, wonderful, loving, helping people, because they have to be to have that level of access to a child. So it's not just the child that they're engendering trust in a relationship with. It's everyone in that child's universe. And so, of course, everyone in that bubble is then going to say, but this is a nice guy.
Yeah. In seeing them in three dimensions, not caricaturizing them, allows us to better understand, better locate, and better address the issues of abuse. Would that be a way of synopsizing sort of what you were going for?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we have this idea that everything is either or, and it's not the case. People can, I would guarantee that in Jared Fogle's situation, there are people prior to his conviction, I would presume, maybe after, but who would be able to 100% say they had positive, wonderful, caring interactions with this person, that he did good things. He might have donated money. He might have volunteered his time. He might have, helped an old lady cross the street. There's probably a long list of technically nice things that he did, but he's also been convicted of very terrible crimes that involve children. Both can be true. And I don't think as a society we've come to terms with that piece of it.
We don't live in a society that does nuance very well.
That's exactly it.
I was thinking about, back to the original reason we were speaking, and which was the cheerleading of the violence perpetrated against violent offenders, and where we want to draw that line, and if we even want to have a line to draw. I'm reminded of the story of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. He was beaten to death in prison. This guy kidnapped and raped and dismembered and murdered 17 people. And I felt no remorse when I heard the news of his death. He was beaten by another inmate. I, in my heart, didn't think, well, the world is a worse place without Dahmer in it. There may have been a part of me that thought, he had it coming. He was a monster. And at the same time, there's a difference between having and negotiating and navigating those feelings and painting a banner and celebrating and sort of anointing as hero the person who beat Dahmer to death, the convicted felon who committed the murder against the murderer. And I worry that this kind of thinking incites potential future violence, as it actually sets people up to say, you know what, if the circumstances warrant it, I can act outside the rule of law, outside of the guidelines my society set in place. I'm excused to be violent in this capacity. And then that becomes this subjective playground. Who knows where people draw those lines?
Well, and that's the same rationale the criminals use in the first place. that in their mind, they're justified in whatever behavior they chose that was outside the boundaries of the society's laws, whether it's abusing children or robbing a bank or murdering someone. They feel justified in their behavior, and that to me is a big part of the point. There's this reaction we all have, and that's the emotion, that's the feeling, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have no problem, and I take no issue with anyone who looks at these news stories and just doesn't care, or has that same, well, guess you should have thought of that. There's a huge difference between owning your own feelings and championing action and applauding the behavior publicly. And that's, to me, the disconnect.
I can already see people are going to hear the headline of what I just said without getting into the depth of what I said. And they're going to say I was a Dahmer apologist or something, How can you excuse, and in no way, of course, have I excused it. In fact, I think I admitted outright that inside, under my skin, I may have been a little bit glad that he was no longer around to harm anyone else. I mean, that's just part of my human condition. But I can already see the comment section. People are going to hear a phrase or a tag or a word or a sentence or what they consider to be a trigger or whatnot, and they're just going to flip out. It's one of the reasons the YouTube comment section and online social media comment sections are such a challenge, because people seem to have this tendency to want to speak in extremes, or they hear one thing that sends them into orbit and they stop listening to everything else. And it's a real challenge to advance discourse in this environment.
Well, the other thing that I think people forget, because the internet, is wonderful as it is to give us access to this planet and all the information, it's also fairly one-dimensional, because we don't see or even conceptualize all of the people who are reading the comments that are made. And one of the things that is a big part of where I've gotten this perspective with what's happened with our family and seeing everyone just applaud the violence towards these criminals is when our situation happened, there were news stories that came out, and some of the children that were involved in the scenario with our case are old enough to be on social media, and their friends are on social media and all of that. And they saw these articles and they read the comments. And, obviously, as adults, we have the running joke of never read the comments for stuff that, directly affects us. And what do? We usually read the comments. But kids, teenagers, preteens, they certainly don't have the emotional fortitude. But what they are dealing with is that they were a part of the revelations that resulted in these charges. They were a part of disclosing abuse that they went through. And that was already difficult enough. And they saw very immediate ramifications that were necessary consequences. And I don't use consequences in a negative way, just as consequences as of an action, to protect them, to protect the family, to protect other children. And I think people forget that one of the challenges that then is created is these kids are reading these comments of someone that they have major problems with their behavior, but they also are struggling to reconcile feelings for and understand their relationship and what that was, and all of the dynamics of that, and overcome the trauma of what they've experienced. They already have the shame and the guilt of being abused. They already feel like it's their fault that our family just kind of imploded and we lost our primary income and all these other things. And now they're looking at it, and I've got a kid looking at me in tears saying, I don't want them murdered. I don't want anyone to kill them. I don't understand. That's not what I wanted. I just wanted it to stop.
It's difficult for us in many instances when we see the worst done to people we care about to try to say the right thing. Sarah, how can we help you? I'm so sorry. What do you need? I mean, they sound kind of empty on the surface because we can't think of what else to say. But I hope that you're feeling the support and love and the desire to help from those, in the secular community, in your own family, wherever in your circles. I hope you're getting that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. When all of this came about, I was actually on the other side of the country, and I was speaking at an event when the disclosure happened at my house. And by the time I scrambled around and was able to get home and try to put the pieces together, I put out a call on my social network that just said there's a family that's going through this difficulty. And, I didn't identify myself. I've done this before for other families. It's certainly nothing that would catch anyone off guard. And And I was absolutely touched that without identifying that it was me or my children, who a lot of people know and love, all over the world, there was this overwhelming response. And I had said, message me privately, if you have any resources that you can suggest. And people were coming out of the woodwork saying, can I find someone in their area, to send them some clothes? Can I, help them find somewhere to stay? Do they have shelter resources? And I'm not even talking about money. I don't even think that even existed at that moment. It was more just this overwhelming response from these awesome people who didn't even know the family at the time who we were talking about, saying, what can I possibly do to help? And that to me was that first glimmer of, we're going to get through this. And of course I responded back and said, this is our personal situation. And to see people kick into gear at that point was very helpful as well. But the fact that it didn't even have to be me, people were just coming out of the woodwork saying, I want to help in any way I can. Tell me where they are. I want to send them shoes. I want to send them coats, that kind of thing. That made me realize that, everybody out there really cares about these people going through these scenarios. That faceless idea of the internet, there's the comments, don't read the comments, but there's certainly plenty of other people who really do care. And that's a big part of this too.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of comments happening about the blog that you have written. Again, I'll link it in the description box. I would encourage everyone not just to read the first paragraph, read the article. Agree, disagree, but read, and then we can speak, not shout, about our thoughts on a very sensitive and very troubling but very important issue. Sarah, thanks for lending your voice to this. Thanks for being a part of a discussion, even though things are so tumultuous in your personal life. And I have high hopes for great things for you and your kids in the years ahead, okay?
Thanks. I appreciate it, Seth, very much.